Everyone, I'm Alpha Somani. You are on the chapter number 3, An Unpleasant Happening. We have done a part of it up till now. What had happened in the chapter? There's a kid. There's a kid whose name is Roald Dahl, the author of the chapter. And his mother suspects that he might have adenoids. Adenoids are like the tonsils in the throat. So Roald Dahl's, the kid's mother, she suspects that he might have adenoids. So this kid is taken to a doctor. So as he's a kid, he's very frightened to go to the doctor. So he goes to the doctor with his mother, and there the doctor starts preparing for the operation for taking out his adenoids. Okay, so doctor starts preparing for the operation and taking out the adenoids which the kid has in his throat. Okay, so I had given you assignment and let's discuss the assignment. Some of you have still not completed your assignment. I have not submitted on Scholars ERP. So please do it as soon as possible. I'm keeping a check of all those who are doing their assignments and all those who are not doing their assignments. So all of you complete your assignments and submit it to me on Scholars ERP. So this is assignment number 2, which I had given to you, and let's discuss the questions and the answers. So there's doctor, there's nurse, the kid is there and with his mother. Okay. So what did the nurse do when she entered the room? When the nurse in the doctor's clinic, when she entered the room, what did she do? The kid was sitting on the dentist chair, right? So the nurse, she ties a red rubber apron around the kid's neck. Okay, so nurse, what does she do? She ties a red rubber apron around the kid's neck. She ties an apron around his neck. What made the boy open his mouth? So earlier, the boy was not, he was very reluctant to open his mouth because he was afraid that doctor might do something with his teeth, because that doctor might insert that instrument, that long shiny instrument in his mouth, and the doctor will do something with his teeth. Okay, so why was not the boy not opening his mouth? Because he was afraid. And then what happened? What something happened that the boy opened his mouth. The doctor asked the kid very gently that please open your mouth. It will not take longer. It will just take 2 seconds. So as the doctor asked the kid very gently, so the boy he agreed to open his mouth. Question number 3. How did the doctor operate the boy? So the whole operation process we will learn later, but what about this minimal operation process which had taken place? The doctor operated the boy by using a long, thin, shiny instrument. Okay, so the doctor prepared to operate the boy with a long, thin, shiny instrument. Okay, so all of you complete your assignments and we will start with the chapter. We will start with the rest of the chapter. The tiny blade disappeared and went high up into the roof of my mouth. So the kid is sitting into the dentist chair. The doctor is standing near him. The doctor is standing with a long, shiny, thick instrument in his hands, and the nurse is standing nearby. Okay, so this is the scene we have. The tiny blade disappeared and went high up into the roof of my mouth. So the doctor inserts that blade, that instrument having a blade, into the kid's mouth. The doctor gave the blade 4 or 5 very quick little twists. So he inserts the blade into the kid's mouth and he twists the blade. Okay, he moves like you cut something from a knife, you twist something, right? So similarly, the doctor also he twists the blade. And the next moment, and then what happened? He puts the blade into his mouth, he twists the blade, and then what happens? A whole lot of blood and flesh came bubbling out into the basin. And as soon as he puts the blade into his mouth, into the kid's mouth, and as soon as that happens, what happens next? The next moment, a whole lot of blood and flesh starts coming out of his mouth. Okay, the coming out of kid's mouth. I was horrified by the huge red lumps that had fallen out of my mouth. So there were red lumps falling out of his mouth. There was blood falling out of his mouth. So for a kid, that is very frightening, right? For a kid, that is very, he must be afraid that blood is coming out of my mouth, that huge red lumps are coming out of my mouth. So the boy was very afraid to see that and too shocked to do anything but let out a yelp. Just imagine if something happens to you, if something like this happens to you, and the blood starts coming off your mouth and the red lumps start coming off your mouth. So what will you do? You will start shouting, right? Because that's a very horrified process. You're afraid to see such amount of blood and such amount of red lumps coming out of your mouth. Similarly, the boy could not do anything, but he just shouted. Yelp means to shout. So the boy shouted, looking at that amount of blood coming out of his mouth. I thought the doctor had cut off the middle of my head. And what did the boy thought? That the doctor, he did not know that he must have adenoids or he must have tonsils, that the doctor is removing the tonsils. He did not know anything. He just thought that the doctor has cut his throat, that the doctor has cut the middle of his head. He just thought that the doctor inserted the blade into his mouth and cut the he cut the head of the child. So the kid thought that he must have done that. So the doctor simply said those were your adenoids. So the red lumps, the blood which was coming out of of the kid's mouth, what were those? Those were the adenoids. As the boy had adenoids, that's why he was taken to the doctor. And there, what did the doctor do? He removed those adenoids. He simply just removed those adenoids. What happened when the doctor gave the blood a very quick little twist? As soon as he put the blade into his mouth and he twists the blade, the blood starts coming out of his mouth. Blood and red lumps start coming out of his mouth. Where did the tiny blade disappear? The tiny blade was put into the child's throat, into the child's mouth, and there it disappeared. Disappeared means the doctor just puts the blade into the kid's mouth and it starts disappearing. It's not longer seen anymore. The boy could not see the blade because it was in his mouth. Which activity horrified the little boy? As the red lumps and a huge lot amount of blood was coming out of the boy's mouth, and that thing horrified the little boy. What had the boy thought about the operation? What did the boy thought? That the doctor has cut the middle of his head, that the doctor has cut his throat, and that's why this blood is coming out of his mouth. I sat there, breathing hard. Who's I here? The kid. He's explaining the whole story, right? So it's I is the kid here. I sat there, breathing hard. The roof of my mouth seemed to be on fire. Okay, so the kid was sitting there. He was breathing so heavily because he was so afraid, right? And the roof of my mouth means you in your mouth, the top part of your mouth, that means the roof of your mouth, and the roof of my mouth seemed to be on fire. See, on fire means it was burning heavily. The top of the mouth of the kid, it was burning so much. It was on fire. I grabbed my mother's hand and held it tightly. So he was a kid. He was very afraid to see such amount of blood, and he was so afraid to see that operation that he grabbed his mother's hand and he held it tightly. He took his mother's hands into his hands and he holds her hands tightly because he was so much afraid of it. Stay where you are, the doctor said. You will be all right in a minute. So, what did the doctor say? That you just stay where you are, just sit down calmly, and you will be all right. You will be okay in a minute. I was still dripping blood from my mouth into the bowl which the nurse was holding. So the nurse was holding a bowl and the kid was dripping blood from his mouth. The kid was vomiting the blood from his mouth. Spit it all out, she said. Who's she here? The nurse is she. So the nurse says, spit all the blood out. Whichever blood you have in your mouth, you just spit it. Spit means थूकना. सारा जो blood आपके पास है मुंह में है वो थूक दो into this bowl. There's a good boy. And she says, oh, that's a good boy. You're doing good. You're very nice. Just spit the all blood out. So the nurse is how is she behaving? She is behaving very calmly. She is behaving very in a very friendly manner. That you are a good guy, you are a good boy. Just spit it all out. And she was very helpful to the kid. She is helping the kid in vomiting, and she's helping the kid in throwing the blood out. Then the nurse wiped my lips and washed my face. Then the nurse, she wiped my lips. She wiped the lips of the kid, and because there was blood on his face, right? And so she washed the face of the kid. They lifted me out of the chair and stood me on my feet. And then they lifted the kid and they stood him on his feet. Then what did they do? The nurse and the doctor, they lift the kid up and they tell them that you stand on your feet now. Then you can stand now. Up till now, the kid was sitting down on the chair, and now the doctor says that you can stand, you can relax. I felt very shaky. So the kid now feels very shaky. Why does the shaky means? He was shivering, he was trembling, means he was feeling very weak, and that's why his whole body was shivering. The whole body was trembling. उसकी पूरी body जो थी वो कांप रही थी. Why? Because he was feeling very weak. What seemed to be on fire? The upper part of the mouth or the top of the mouth, roof of the mouth of the kid. It seemed to be on fire. What did the doctor assure the little boy about? That the doctor assured the boy that he will be okay in a minute, that you will be simply okay. Just calm down. The doctor told him to calm down and relax. What was the nurse holding and why? What was she holding? She was holding a bowl into which the kid was spitting. The kid was spitting blood into the bowl, and the nurse was holding that bowl. Who helped the little boy to clean all the blood from his face? Who helped the boy in cleaning the face? The nurse helped the boy in cleaning the face. So, up till now, what has happened? The operation has been performed on the kid. The doctor has removed the adenoids from his mouth, and there is a whole lot of blood and lumps are which are coming out of his mouth. The nurse helps the kid in washing his face and wiping his lips. And now, let's see what happens. The boy is very afraid because he has had an operation, because he has seen a whole lot of amount of blood. He has seen the lumps coming out of his mouth. So the kid is afraid. The kid is very much afraid. And now the doctor is saying that they just tipped him out of the chair and stood on his feet. And the kid is feeling very shaky because he is feeling very weak. My mother took my hand and we walked. Then what happens? Because the operation is complete now, so the kid and the mother, they are walking out of the doctor's clinic. My mother took my hand and we walked the full half hour it took to reach home. They just walked to home. Just for example, suppose you have had an operation today, you have an operation or you have removed your teeth. Your parents will be taking you on your scooty, on your cars, in an auto, right? You won't be walking to your home because they will be afraid that you have an operation. You might feel weak. But this whole incident, when Roald Dahl had his adenoids removed, this whole incident it belongs to a very past. It's dated back to 1924. So during those era, it was the taxis, the rickshaws, the autos, they were not popular, okay? The people used to walk to their home. Today we use scooties, today we use cars, we use autos to go from one place to another. At that time, walking was the popular thing to go from one place to another. So, no trolley car or taxi for me. They did not take any trolley car or taxi or a bus or a cab. They did not take anything. The kid and his mother, They walked with on their feet. They walked to their home. My grandmother said, and as when they reached their home, the grandmother said, let him sit in that chair and rest for a while. After all, he has had an operation. So when they both reached the home, what did the grandmother say? She says that let him sit in the chair. कि बच्चे को आप चेयर में बिठाओ क्योंकि अभी उसका ऑपरेशन हुआ है. It was, although it was very short period of time, the operation removing the adenoids, it was for very short period of time. It did not take longer like a regular operation. But we will call it an operation because a blade was used to remove the lumps. So that's why it was a mini operation. So the grandmother says that let the child relax into a chair because he has had an operation. So I sat near her and she covered one of my hands in both of hers and said, that won't be the last time you will go to a doctor. And with a bit of a luck, they won't do you much harm. So the kid now, he sits beside his grandmother. And what does the grandmother say? The grandmother holds the hand of the child. She holds his hand in both of her hands and she relaxes. And she tells the boy to relax. And she tells the boy to calm down because he has had an operation. And also, what does she tell her? Tell him that won't be the last time you will go to a doctor. So she just relaxes him. She says that it is not the last time that you go to a doctor. There will be more times. There will be many more times when you will visit the doctor. This was not the last time. ऐसा नहीं था कि तुम डॉक्टर के पास अभी लास्ट बार गए हो अब तुम्हें कभी जाना ही नहीं पड़ेगा. No, no, no. You will have to visit the doctor many more times. आपको डॉक्टर के पास और भी बहुत बार जाना पड़ेगा. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid with doctors. Generally, the kids, small children, they have the tendency to fear the doctor. They fear doctor. That doctor के पास जाना पड़ रहा है, so there must be something very frightening, right? So that's why the grandmother tells the kid that relax. This was not the last time you were going to a doctor. You might have to visit doctor many more times in your life. So just don't be afraid of doctors, and they won't do you too much harm that the doc as you are afraid that doctor might do something to you. So don't be afraid of doctors. They will not do you any harm. वो आपका कुछ बुरा नहीं करेंगे doctors. So just don't be afraid of doctors. That was in 1924. So whole incident, the all of this incident when Roald Dahl's adenoids were removed, this was in 1924 when taking out a child's tonsils as well as adenoids without any anesthetic was common. So it was back then, back in 1924, so long time ago, that children's tonsils or adenoids, they were removed without using an anesthesia. So what is an anesthesia? When some doctor performs an operation on your body, he just cannot simply cut that part of your body, right? It must be very painful. So just to remove that pain, they give you an anesthesia. For example, they are putting, if I have an anesthesia, if the doctor is putting a blade on my hand, I won't feel that. Why? Because मैंने anesthesia ले रखा है, डॉक्टर ने मुझे anesthesia दे रखा है. एक तरीके से आपको कुछ feel नहीं होता है. If the doctor puts a blade on your hand, the doctor operates on your body, you won't feel that. Okay? So when a doctor performs an operation on you, in these times anesthesia is given. But this whole incident, it was back in 1924, long time ago. So at that time, people were not given anesthesia, and the operations, like small operations like removing adenoids, removing tonsils, they used to take place without giving any anesthesia in 1924. I wonder what you would think if a doctor did that to you today. So Roald Dahl is saying, I just don't know will you feel if the doctor today removes your tonsils, your adenoids, and he puts a blade in your mouth and removes your adenoids and removes your tonsils without giving an anesthesia. So how would you feel? Roald Dahl is asking you. Roald Dahl is asking you people that how would you feel if the doctor does that to you today? The doctor does that, what the doctor did to Roald Dahl if the similar thing, similar operation, if the doctor does that to you, you people, you children, how will you feel? Because the operation was done without using anesthesia, and it was painful for a small child. And it is how the operations were performed in 1924 and those times. How much time did they take to reach home? How much time did they take? Who is they here? They is the mother and the child. How much time did they take? They took full half hour, आधा घंटा लगा उन्हें to reach home. What did the grandmother instruct to his mother? What did the grandmother told the mother? That let the child relax and let the child sit because he has had an operation. And why was she sympathetic towards the grandson? Sympathetic means उनको ऐसे सहानुभूति क्यों हो रही थी अपने grandson के पीछे कि अरे बेचारे का operation हुआ है, let him sit. What was the common what was common about taking out a child's tonsils in 1924? So how the child's tonsils were taken out in 1924? They were taken out without using any anesthesia. Back in 1924, the child's tonsils, child's adenoids, they were taken out without using an anesthesia. Okay, so that's all about the chapter. And our chapter is complete now. We will be doing the question answers of the chapter in the next session, in the next lecture. Till then, for today, for you're given this assignment, these 3 questions you have to do in your copy as an assignment, and you have to submit me on Scholars ERP. So I'm seeing that some of the students are not doing their question and answers, so please complete that and submit it on the Scholars ERP, and I'll be waiting for your assignment. And thank you so much for today's lecture. I'll see you in the next one.